Gone are the days when Audeze could corner the planar magnetic market and charge absurd prices for their gear without competition. You no longer have to settle for Hi-Fi Man's terrible quality control issues just to listen to a planar magnetic signature at a cheaper price. Audiophiles now have plenty of hi-fi brands to choose from when browsing the planar magnetic offerings, both in headphones and IEMs. A fairly recent brand into this area is FiiO. They delved into the headphone market with the FT5, a dynamic driver headphone, but they've also made an attempt at planar magnetics. This is the FT5, a $450 planar magnetic headphone. The good folks at Appos Audio let me borrow the FT5 for this review. Check out Appos this holiday season if you're looking for a gift. Appos has great customer service, a good return and refund policy, and all the latest gear to choose from. The FT5's marketing focuses heavily on specifications, which is symbolic of hi-fi brands. Chinese companies have technical capabilities and manufacturing groundwork that makes it tough for Western brands to compete with, hence the specification-laden marketing material, which is par for the course. I'm not one to spend much time talking about the magnetic structure or coil designs of headphones. A lot of this stuff goes over most people's heads, and frankly, the only thing that matters is overall sound and comfort. So, if we jump past FiiO's overly wordy specifications headlines, we're left with a very little bit of information about the sound and comfort. FiiO claims that the FT5 will faithfully reproduce every last note, which is a hyperbolic statement that has no comparative value. The company also says that the FT5 has, quote, highly detailed sound, rich bass not usually found in planar magnetic headphones, and treble resolution unmatched by dynamic drivers, while still providing wide and vast soundstage. Thankfully, FiiO provides a frequency response graph. If accurate, this shows a heavy emphasis from sub-bass through mid-bass, a push in the vocal region, and a very significant dip in the 3 to 5 kHz area. It's really hard to tell what FiiO is aiming for with this graph alone. But the graph does not remotely suggest a neutral sound signature, so all that marketing about accurately reproducing the music is, well, inaccurate. Nevertheless, I was very curious to listen to the FT5. The boast about rich bass had me intrigued. Ultimately, the marketing reveals nothing useful. As for build, I cannot state emphatically enough how well built the FT5 is. This is a brilliant design, though not without some critiques. The FT5 is made of metal, comes in stealth black, and looks and feels premium from the get-go. The ear cups swivel sufficiently for proper placement. The headband is not padded, but does have a velvety type of layer that is very soft and comfortable. The FT5 is a fairly heavy headphone. Those metal ear cups add most of the weight. The clamping force is a bit on the tighter side. Depending on your head size, this headphone will either feel pretty standard or like a vice. The clamping force is similar to that of the HD6XX, but the overall weight and design of the FT5 makes it feel like it's a lot tighter than the HD6XX. The FT5 connects with a dual 3.5mm cable. That is a good departure from the typical mini XLR of some other luxury planar magnetic brands. The headphone comes with a luxurious leather case and a set of pleather ear pads along with the suede that are pre-installed. The cable FiiO includes is their proprietary multi-junction cable, allowing you to swap terminators rather than carry around multiple cables. Overall, I found the fit and finish outstanding. The FT5 looks and is presented like a premium headphone, and frankly, more so. In contrast, my Focal Utopia came in a janky box, and you have to pay more money for audeze to include a silly waterproof case that is simply overkill and not remotely luxurious. FiiO did a good job designing this headphone. The one gripe I have, and I think some other people will probably have, is the clamping force. I used the FT5 for 5 weeks as one of my go-to headphones. I listened to my lossless music library, streamed lossy audio from Spotify and YouTube, watched movies and TV shows, tested using my test playlist, and listened casually for hours on end. I paired this headphone with numerous sources, including the Matrix Mini I Pro, SMSL Raw, Mytek Brooklyn DAG Plus, Low2PA 6000, Low2PA S1, and the hifi iCan and IDSD combo. I did my typical A-B comparisons against other headphones, and that list included the Focal Utopia, Moondrop Para, and the Sennheiser HD6XS. For the sound summary, I relied principally on the Suede earpads since they were pre-installed, and I assume those are the ones that FiiO prefers that we actually use. FiiO claims that the FT5 has rich bass. We see in their frequency response graph a heavy emphasis in that region. The reality is that the FT5 very much has a bass emphasis, more so than most other planar headphones I have heard. But the FT5 retains that classic planar transience, quick with decay, that is noticeably faster and clearer than on your average dynamic driver that might have about the same amount of bass emphasis. In Mountains by Hans Zimmer, there's a low rumble that starts at the very beginning and plays throughout the track. The majority of planar headphones and IEMs simply cannot recreate that robust low bass. The FT5 did a far better job than I was expecting, but this is not anywhere close to a dynamic driver performance, to be perfectly honest. The sub-bass was present on the FT5, but only after I pushed the volume to above my personal comfort level, but not by a whole lot. Nevertheless, that sub-bass was far more obvious on the FT5 than on, say, the Utopia, which is a dynamic driver, the LCD2 Classic, and the LCD4Z, which are both audeze's planar magnetic large formats. The Para had a far quieter presentation of sub-bass compared to the FT5, almost whisper quality. The HD6XX, on the other hand, rendered a thicker, less clear, but clearly more obvious bass than the FT5, Utopia, LCD2, LCD4Z, and the Para. In all the bassy tracks I tried, Mountains, Conquer, Irodori, Pure Water, Angel by Massive Attack, Moons by MB, the FT5 always stood out among the planar magnetic rivals as having more obvious bass while still retaining the clarity and transience that planar drivers are known for. Drum strikes on the FT5 were hard but not sharp or piercing, somewhat similar in this respect to the HD6XX. In contrast, if you listen to something from Audeze, for example, say the LCD-X or the XC, then what'll happen is that you'll hear those drum strikes, they'll be sharp, almost pinprick-like right inside your drums. The mids on the FT5 were a bit of a pleasant surprise. My experience with Hi-Fi headphones and IEMs has been consistent. Hi-Fi tuning pushes vocals and adds piercing sibilance and vocal grain. Thankfully, the FT5 steps away from that usual tuning. The FT5 does have a marginal emphasis to vocals, but it's balanced with the bass. The bass instruments tend to stand shoulder to shoulder with vocals in a mix, and there's just a very slight sibilance emphasis to those vocals, but no apparent added vocal grain. In Want You Back by Haim and Why Am I Like This by Orla Gartland, tracks that were recorded with sibilance, the FT5 did not emphasize that detail to an extent that made it harmful or hurtful to my ears. In fact, I double-checked by comparing to my Allo S5X, which is very neutral, and I confirmed that the FT5's vocal presentation is rather close to neutral in this very specific respect when compared with the S5X. In contrast, the Para has a bit more sibilance emphasis, though not anything like what the HD560S does. The 560S, by the way, is one of the harshest headphones I have ever heard and stabs a normal ear with sibilance, if that sibilance is recorded into your track. The Utopia emphasizes vocal grain and sibilance more than the FT5 and Para. However, its sibilance emphasis is less than that of the LCD2, and of course the HD6XX had the most neutral rendition of all the headphones I compared other than the S5X. Clarity in the mid-region is more obvious on the Para and the LCD2. For better or worse, the FT5's bass emphasis tends to diminish the details in the mids. Multiple vocalists do not stand out as clearly, subtle details sometimes get lost altogether, and vocal sounds fairly close to the ears. In contrast, all the other headphones I tested were providing more clarity, separation, and detail in the mids region, generally speaking. The FT5's treble is fairly close to neutral, but there's a noticeable reduction in the upper treble that might be a bit too underemphasized for some. Low treble instruments are energetic, clear, and sound detailed. In Skirts Over X-Wings, for example, the FT5 made the brass and horns sound distinct and present close to the ears. But any instrument that had a higher reach tended to have a distant sound, as if their notes fell off or were being slightly muffled, as it might happen if you put a thin cloth over the bell of a saxophone or trombone or trumpet. The Utopia seems to have fairly neutral rendition in the low to mid treble region, but there's an obvious emphasis in the upper treble. The Utopia has greater separation of treble instruments and more obvious placement. The Para's treble is close to neutral. There seems to be a nominal mid-treble dip, which becomes obvious when compared to the LCD2 Classic, the Utopia, and the FT5. Overall clarity here is basically a toss-up between the FT5 and the Para. The HT6XX has the most neutral rendition of the group, but it also has the least detail and is the least clear of them all. Instruments sound very close to the ears and have less separation on the 6XX. On the other hand, the 6XX never comes close to sounding fatiguing, even at very high volumes. The FT5's detail retrieval stands in contrast to some of FiiO's marketing. The marketing might give you the impression that the FT5 will render all the details in a track, and that is far from true. The FT5 has no better than average detail retrieval, similar to what would be found on the HT6XX. Obvious details such as sharp intakes of breaths, twangs of guitar strings thumping on the body of the guitar, gravelly natures of voices, all this kind of stuff is easily audible on the FT5 because, frankly, it was meant to be audible during the recording process. But soft footfalls, gentle electric buzzing, creaking of wood, and layered vocals can become muffled or hard to hear. In my new light footstep test, the FT5 presented 8 clear footsteps. The Utopia provided 10, the Para 11, and the HT6XX rendered 7. Finally, even though the FT5 is an open back headphone, it does not provide a wide soundstage. It instead presents an intimate, close to the ears sound. While instruments may sound either in the left or right ear cup and sometimes have a marginal distance applied to them, the FT5 will not provide the amphitheater type of experience that the marketing might be alluding to. I would say that the FT5 has soundstage that is slightly wider than the HT6XX, but it is nowhere as wide as the hifi meze Sundara, Aventone Planar, or Focal Utopia. The Para has wider soundstage than the FT5 as well. My takeaway from the FT5 is this. This is a superb headphone. If you ignore their marketing and concentrate on the sound and the headphone's presentation, you'll find some unique attributes. First and foremost, the FT5 has robust bass. That bass retains the classic planar transience and clarity, but sounds similar in emphasis and thickness to some dynamic drivers. The mids are slightly emphasized, but without any harshness or piercing sibilance. The treble lacks a bit of energy in the upper treble, but otherwise is close to neutral. The FT5 has average detail and soundstage, nothing close to groundbreaking or different from what we've received in the market for decades at a time. But it's the overall package that is impressive with the FT5. The build quality is outstanding, the accessories are top-notch, the sound signature is a unique mix of planar and dynamic that finally brings something new to the table. I am a huge fan of the FT5. I stopped buying headphones a few years ago since my collection is bursting at the seams. Companies now let me borrow gear and give me the freedom to test for a very long time before returning their stuff. So I don't feel the compulsion to buy headphones or IMs to do a proper testing since I have a lot of time to do it. And seldom do I come across a headphone that I personally want to buy these days. I think the FT5 is one of those headphones that I really do want to buy for myself. It's not a perfect headphone, but its sound signature is something different for me. And given its price tag, it's well worth my money, I think. However, you should do your own research. The FT5 might not be the right fit for you. It might be too heavy, too basic, not clear enough, or simply too expensive. There are a multitude of alternatives in the market, some of which offer something more to your liking. But if you think that the FT5 might be worth checking out, then I strongly recommend giving it a try. And if you buy it from Appos, you'll have a good return guarantee.